Hello and welcome to Pathways. This is your host, Paul O'Brien. And this is where you are invited to join me for a visit with leaders in personal development and cultural evolution. Death and dying is a reality that many of us fear. However, since we all die eventually, perhaps there's a way to move past fear of the inevitable and focus instead on living life to the fullest. Today, we're talking with a pioneer of the conscious dying movement who helps people understand and overcome their fear of death, and in so doing, their fear of life. Our guest is RamDev Dale Borglum, author of the new book, How to Live So You Can Die Without Fear. RamDev is the executive director of the Living/Dying Project. A pioneering figure in the conscious dying movement, he has spent decades helping individuals face death and life with greater awareness, collaborating with the likes of Ram Dass, Stephen Levine, and Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, two of whom were featured on Pathways in years long past. Drawing on his background as a mathematician, meditation teacher, lover of God, and devoted practitioner of both Eastern and Western healing traditions, Borglum offers a uniquely practical and accessible map to the healing path, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Hello, RamDev, and welcome to the Pathways Show.
Hey there, glad to be here.
Okay, so on top of everything else you do, what made you decide to publish a book?
Well, believe it or not, I've been teaching this stuff for over 50 years now, and people kept saying, "I love what you're talking about. Where can I read more about that?" And I finally said, "I'll write the book. Okay, stop bothering me. I'll write the book."
There you go. Okay,
Uh,
well,
and there's a lot of books out there about a Buddhist approach to dying. In fact, when I started doing this work, I got a copy of Who Dies by Stephen Levine and gave it to my dad so he could figure out what I was doing. And he read the book and he said, "I'm sure your friend is a really wonderful and smart guy, but I have no idea what he's talking about." Right. So
right.
I wanted to write a book for your grandmother, for your mother, for somebody who's a fundamentalist Christian that everybody wants to be happier, everybody wants to suffer less, and underneath all of our difficult emotions, fundamentally is fear of death. My equation as a recovering mathematician is all fear is basically fear of death, and fear of death is exactly the place where you're not enlightened, the place where you're caught in the illusion that you and I are separate from each other, from God, from the planet, whatever.
Okay.
So that the book really isn't about how to die well. It's about how to live well, how to take the fact that we are going to die and look at what all the different traditions have said about living and dying. And I think I have some ability because of this mathematical training to see these overriding patterns and put together a healing paradigm that can show you where you are and what you might need to do next. One of my
Right.
first meditation teachers, Trungpa Rinpoche, said, "Until you have an intimate contact with death, your spiritual practice will have the quality of you being a dilettante." Right? And I know people who have meditated so much their knees are about to fall off,
Right.
and, they really aren't in touch with death, and they're really good meditators, and they're calmer, but I don't think they're getting the deeper fruits of the practice. At the same time, I know people who are on the front lines of healthcare, are working with dying every day, and don't have the contemplative piece.
Right.
So putting the 2 together, that's the
Mhm.
best practice in this crazy time in which we're living.
And your book does such a beautiful job of explicating that intersection. I just loved it. Now, let's talk about fear for a second, the fear and the ego, because you make the appointment that, the primacy of the egos is the ego's fear of death. That's the primordial substratum for fear. And but then you say we are addicted to the fear we feel about dying. And we're addicted to our thoughts and beliefs and blah, blah, blah. So this is a way of being disconnected from ourselves,
Right.
such that we're not going to really have a very um, good death. So in other words, you kind of equate having a good life with having a good having a good death. Is that true?
Having a really good life prepares one to have a more full death. I don't know what a good death really means particularly, but the contemplative religions say that the moment of dying is the best opportunity in an extended lifetime to realize who one truly is. Like right now, it looks like you're in Portland, you're in Oregon, I'm in California, you've got on a blue shirt, I've got on a white shirt. We're different, we're separate. And that is true. I mean, I'm not saying
Right.
that that's not one level of reality, but is there this other level of reality where we're one, where uh, we feel that sense of deep connectedness. And people who have taken strong psychedelics have often experienced a great reduction in fear of death.
Hmm.
People who have dived very deeply into meditation at times have experienced a great reduction in fear of death because in either of those cases, you're being forced to look at what you're holding on to. And is there another more spacious dimension that one can surrender into? So that in a way, dying isn't something we do, it's something we surrender into. And the longer that I've done spiritual practice, it's less, okay, I'm going to do my practice. I'm going to pay attention to my breath. I'm going to do my mantra. It's more surrendering the grace, surrendering the presence, opening into what's already here.
It's a letting go. I mean, that's what surrender is, right? A letting go. I know there have been many times in a intense psychedelic experience that I've had where there were times when I felt, taking ayahuasca, for instance, I felt like I was hanging out for dear life, but I couldn't fight it. I had to just let it go. I had to surrender.
Ayahuasca to me is like you're on this train going at full speed down into the netherworld and there's no way to get off. It's
Exactly.
like you just gotta, I'm on the ride here. I better deal with it. I better just surrender into this ride.
Right, right. Well, you share a powerful story about, you mentioned your father, and you share a powerful story about a conversation you had with him as he was dying. And just share with us what that taught you about honesty and vulnerability at the end of life.
Well, my dad was a Danish Lutheran. All my grandparents came from Denmark. I was raised as a Danish Lutheran. My parents were very loving, but not particularly warm and fuzzy. And I remember I was in the car with my mom and my dad and my girlfriend at the time, a bunch of years ago. And I said to my dad, "Hey, I'm going to teach a workshop next weekend in Berkeley about conscious dying. Would you like to know what I'm going to talk about?" He said, "Isn't it a beautiful day today?" He didn't want to talk about it, right?
Right.
Fast forward, he's in a bed in the local community hospital about a week from dying with metastatic prostate cancer. And I just have this intuitive notion to say, what do you think is going on right now? And I find that's a incredibly useful strategy because there's always an implied contract between two people. What are you willing to talk about? When I was in the car with my dad, the contract was, I'm the dad, you're the kid. You don't know that much. I'm the guy in charge here. But okay. I just
Right.
had this sense that maybe the contract had changed. What do you think is going on here? And he said, I don't know. What do you think? He invited me in. And I said, well,
Right.
I really hope I'm wrong, but what I know medically, you're approaching death. And he said, that's the way it feels to me. And that man and I had the most real conversation we'd ever had in our lives. We talked for an hour or so. It went a long way in healing anything that was left undone in the father son relationship.
Right.
And when the conversation was over, he said, drive home, get your mom, tell her that I feel like I'm dying. I want to talk to her about that, bring her back to the hospital. So I drive home and I said, Mom, dad feels like he's dying and he wants to talk to you about it. And she said, no, he doesn't. And I said, yes, he does. Get in the car. And I took her to the hospital and they talked and they cried and she climbed in bed with him and they held each other.
Right. Now, I'm sure one size doesn't fit all. I mean, What is the best way to support a person who's dying and afraid? Or is doing exactly what you did with your dad, just have this point blank conversation, a real
Well,
conversation?
that's a great question, and many years ago, when I was like a seeker, I was really into finding all the teachers and gurus as they were coming through the Bay Area. I had a test question for them, which was exactly the question you just asked me. I said, "Suppose I had a friend who was dying, he'd never meditated much, he was really afraid. What's the best thing I could do?" And almost all of them said something like, "Merge your mind with the one mind, and then merge your mind with the mind of your friend." They didn't say, "Look at the fact that your friend has cancer. Focus on the cancer, fixing the cancer,"
Right,
or "Focus on your friend who feels he has a problem," not reifying the illness, not even reifying the personhood, but working with the illusion of separateness. And to the extent that you can be there as a living model of wholeness, he then has the opportunity to participate in that or not.
right,
And maybe I'll say something that comes out of that wholeness, but rather than thinking, what's the best thing to say? What should I do? In fact, that kind of that spontaneous question that came out of me, it wasn't that I was sitting there thinking, what should I say to my dad? What can I do here? What can I do here? It just I was there and I was just being as open and present as I could be. And this just kind of popped out of my mouth spontaneously.
right, right. You know, it's on your book. I don't remember where I read this, but it says it offers, you're offering a uniquely practical and accessible map to a healing path that you created. Okay, let's talk about that. The map to the healing path. That's what the whole book is about. I know we can't encapsulate that in a few minutes, but if you would tell us more about that, it'd be awesome.
Okay, well, I've studied Buddhism, devotional Hinduism, Christianity, the chakras, Western psychology, and they all kind of say the same thing. And I find particularly that the stages of early childhood development and the awakening of the chakras and the development of Buddhism are really in lockstep, saying that there are these stages of development. Like halfway through gestation in your mother's womb to about 1 year old, first chakra, you're learning to be grounded.
Right,
And the demon there is fear. My earliest memory is feeling joyful and curious and picking up a hairpin and putting it in an electrical outlet, and boom, I got the shock of my life. I had very loving and protective and supportive parents, and yet my earliest memory is getting almost dead. So so a lot of people did not have such supportive parents necessarily, and so all of us are a bit ungrounded, and particularly when life is challenging, we go up in our heads. Right
right,
now, we're living in a world that is not very supportive. Climate, AI, politics, economics, on and on and on. So many things are out of balance and mostly going in the wrong direction on top of it all, right? So there's this basic fear. In English, we say, I am afraid. In
right.
Spanish, yo tengo miedo. I have fear. In Tibetan, fear is here.
Hmm,
So just in the way Western minds operate, English speaking minds operate, it's hard not to get identified with these passing emotional mind body states, particularly the state of fear, upon which then the second chakra, guilt about what you're doing, third chakra, shame about who you are, uh, we start building this neurotic personality structure that these Asians who wrote all these wonderful scriptures that so many of us have been trying to study, they were walking around barefoot without an iPhone and were embodied. So what I found is that for many, many Westerners, bringing a practice of embodiment, of getting grounded, like right now as we're sitting talking, as you breathe out, can you just feel like you're bringing your energy out through the base of your torso into the earth that supports, the earth of nourishment and support, not the earth of dirt and worms, right? You're bringing the energy down. Getting underneath the fear. You're not trying to fix the fear. You're trusting a sense of support that's always there in abundance. that is in hardly any of the spiritual books, because it's assumed that you're doing that already if you picked up the book in the first place, which is not true for most of the people I meet.
Right. Do you
And then
why do you
after
go
one
ahead.
last point, then
Mhm.
after being grounded, being centered, the martial art of being you, the martial art of being a podcast host or a husband or whatever it is you're doing. Uh, and until we can do those things, have some sense of groundedness and centeredness, it's gonna be very difficult to keep the heart open in any kind of way because the heart is vulnerable. It needs this foundation of groundedness and centeredness of stability to trust the great vulnerability of the heart.
Right.
Please.
Well, I was just gonna say, you talk about embodiment and you talk about, you know, barefoot, um, people, and I lived in India for a year. I understand what you're talking about, how people are in their bodies, and so why do you think death is so denied here in the West as opposed to more indigenous populations? Is it because we're in our head? Is it because of the mind-body split? Is it because of this, cosmology where, you know, we got this mind that's controlling everything?
Well, I would guess that when you were in India, it was a long time ago.
Oh yeah, 1981. Yeah, it was a while.
Okay. So I was there in 1971, and I would guess that India, a lot of India, at least in Delhi and Calcutta and whatever, Bombay, Mumbai, that it's like being in Portland. It's like everybody's got shoes, everybody's got an iPhone or some kind of phone, glued to
Probably,
their
yeah.
ear,
Mhm.
right? So that, uh, in the third world, I know that's not the politically correct term, but whatever, the developing world, 50 years ago and back into history, people that didn't have a lot of stuff were grounded, were centered, but they didn't have a lot of stuff. But people like to have stuff, right? It's like
Yeah, right.
you go to India, everybody's got a motor scooter, everybody's got a TV now. Not everybody, but way, way more people. Like 100 million people probably have been taken out of poverty, which is a fantastic thing. There's so much smog you can't see across the street in Delhi. It's the most
Right,
polluted city in the world. So
right,
there's this dark underbelly now to progress that we're beginning to see, and there's it's a crucial time in history because so many people are clinging to the old way. Let's make America great again the way it used to be. There's no going back, right? It's like, uh, for so many generations, everybody thought, "I could be better off than my parents. I could have a bigger lawn, a bigger car, more stuff." But then, right now, we're in this, like, transition point where it's moving into the new paradigm, which not a bigger lawn, but my belief is that people want to be more put together, more psychologically, spiritually integrated than their parents. Maybe have a smaller car, a smaller house, but happier, more in touch with themselves. So
right,
that there's these real competing world paradigms, boom, right? That's
right.
we can see almost wherever we look.
You never hear the word contentment espoused in our culture. I mean, I hear the Dalai Lama maybe, but it's amazing. And I think that's what you're talking about is this conflict between ambition and contentment
Completely.
or acquisitiveness. Um, you say in the book that you're exhorting the reader. You trust mindfulness. You trust taking refuge. You're saying, I don't need to figure it out. This is not a big self-improvement project. I trust Buddha nature. I love that, and you quote Maharaji, who was your guru and Ramdas's guru in India, and who said, it's much better to trust God than to try to figure things out. Well, that's kind of a tall order for some of us.
Okay, but I'm not talking about belief. I'm not saying
Okay.
because I wrote it, you should do it. I'm saying
Okay.
check it out. I'm saying in your life, when you're being mindful, you're trusting mindfulness. Are you feeling better? Is your life working better than when you're lost in your head being anxious about every damn thing? And or when you're feeling some connectedness with God, uh, rather than, oh my God, what's going to happen? And and even though there's a lot of momentum behind all the early childhood stuff, that gradually, the more you're mindful, the more you trust mindfulness. So when I'm talking about that healing paradigm, there's the mind channel, which is mindfulness. There's the body channel, which initially is getting grounded, getting centered. Uh, we begin to trust those things because they work, not because somebody's telling you about it, right?
Right. Yeah, I love that concept of taking refuge in mindfulness. I've never seen that anywhere. That's an interesting idea.
Well, when you do a Buddhist retreat, you take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha.
Right, right.
And that's exactly what we're talking about.
Okay. Let's talk about compassion. We've only got a couple minutes. Uh, and I'm wondering, this expression, compassion fatigue, I'm
Right.
wondering whether you've ever had to struggle with that because your work calls for so much compassion.
Compassion fatigue does not exist. There's no such thing.
Okay.
There is a term that people have come up with called compassion fatigue, but if you understand compassion, compassion being a heart that is connected to self, to other, to God, to earth, a heart that's spacious, a heart that's warm, there will be no fatigue. People experience a lot of fatigue by being almost compassionate or trying to be compassionate or thinking they're compassionate.
Or
I work
thinking
with
they're not
people.
compassionate enough.
Right, exactly. So I've got these small groups that I facilitate, and in one of them, it's mostly healthcare professionals from San Francisco, nurses on the front lines, and we talk about burnout and how compassion prevents burnout. So that to really understand where the burnout's coming from, it's not from being compassionate because the heart is truly boundless.
Yeah.
The heart is empty of grasping. But if it's not a 0-1 process, my heart is open or it's closed. Somebody's trying to be a nurse or a parent or whatever and try to be compassionate, and maybe the heart's about 70% open and 30% closed, and that 30% that's not compassionate, that's what's creating the burnout, not the compassionate part.
Yeah. These sub personalities or these ego states that, are conflicted about the tension between compassion and self-indulgence, I suppose.
Well,
What
compassion implies you can't feel compassion any more than you're willing to feel the suffering.
Yeah, that's a point you make is that compassion involves the willingness to feel pain. I
Yes.
never thought of it that way before I read your book.
Do you want to define compassion?
Go ahead.
No, you. Do you want to define compassion? Put you on
Well,
the
I
spot.
always thought of compassion as a form of loving kindness for somebody who's suffering, but I
Yeah.
never really included feeling their pain.
Okay. So compassion is exactly the same thing as loving kindness, but in the context of suffering. Compassion for
Right.
my
Right.
own suffering, compassion for your suffering, compassion for the collective.
hmm
And what did you just say? You'd never considered.
I never considered that it involved feeling their pain. I mean, I
Oh,
have,
yeah. Right. Got it.
yeah,
So
that's a,
compassion, if I'm thinking about people are being bombed in Gaza, people are being bombed in Ukraine, people are being bombed in Tel
ir-
Aviv
yeah,
or Tehran or wherever there is, or somebody's being raped or a mother with dry breast and her baby is hungry. I can think about that and say, oh, I should feel some compassion for that. But compassion truly arises when you are willing to feel the pain, the suffering of that person or that group of people,
okay,
to really, that corny Indian saying, put yourself in somebody's moccasins or whatever it is, like to
right,
really feel what is it like to be a mother whose child is hungry and she doesn't have anything to feed the child with. What does that feel like?
right,
Then compassion rises. And in fact, in Buddhism, one of one of the qualities of the fully awakened mind, fully awakened, is naturally arising compassionate activity. You and I and everybody, Donald Trump is compassionate when you're awake. I'm not saying you and I and Donald Trump are
Equally
always awake.
compassionate. Okay, so we have only got a minute left, and I want to make sure to talk about the Dying Center, or there was something you mentioned to me before the show that you wanted to make sure to point out.
Yeah, so the Dying Center doesn't exist. That was in Santa Fe back in the 1980s, but I'm the executive director of the Living Dying Project,
Right.
Living Dying, livingdying.org. Most complete website on the internet about conscious dying. We've got 150 volunteers spread around the world offering free of charge one-to-one support for people who might be approaching death, people who are grieving, people who are have caregiver burnout. We have free of charge groups. I've got a spiritual support group on Zoom every other Saturday that's got 1,200 people in it.
Okay.
Almost everything we do is free of charge. We'd love to have you come.
Thank you so much, and I will. I'm going to check it out, livingdying.org. And I want to thank you, RamDev, for being on the show. There's so much more that we could explore, but we've run out of time for today.
Okay, well, great being here. Thank you.
And for those who may be listening to Pathways live on a Sunday morning and tuned in late,